revolution because we do. There's no other way around it. It's going to happen. Things are collapsing. Civilization's coming, as we know, it's coming to an end. Business as usual is going to collapse. The economy is going to collapse. Politics, the way they're structured now, are collapsing, and that's. But gratitude and feeling of these things that we've been afraid to talk about ever since Reagan, like love and mutual understanding and empathy and compassion and forgiveness and things like that, have to be in the center of what we create out of this. They have to be. We have to hold on to those things and build something strong while we're doing it. It's an honor to be speaking after these great speakers. I heard some really good things, and I didn't know there was a fight over who would go last. So I don't know how I won it. I'm really glad I did. Again, maybe we should do some sort of uprising here to start it right now. Just take something over. Maybe we should. I heard some really great things. One was the anti-life economic analysis that Alberto was talking about, and that's the center of where I'm coming from. And I'm a colony of cells, like you are, and I love the constitution of bacteria. That was brilliant. But that's it. I think life is trying to decide whether or not it's willing to fight back and be realistic about it and what it's going to take. And so I'm just pointing out some things that I heard that I really liked. And I live by the idea of the precautionary principle too, even though I didn't know it. Future generations are real. They're real. They're if you just unhinge yourself from time a little bit, they're right here. You have to look them in the eye. We are responsible for those people, for those human beings. And either you are dead inside and you can turn your back on that, or you're not, and you realize that there's this tiny window of opportunity to help them, to make any kind of difference, and you accept that responsibility. And I hear a lot that it's really dire, and that being alive right now it's so tough because there's going to be a lot of people that die. There's going to be a lot of suffering, but there is already. And to me, it's okay. Well, it's a journey of heartbreak. At least it was for me. When I started out, I was a human rights and peace sort of activist, and I jumped on board with somebody who was working on Darfur and looking at the problem of it. I didn't really care about climate change very much because I didn't get it. I thought polar bears were awesome and everything, but they just didn't get me up in the morning and make me want to go help. What got me up in the morning was the idea of children getting their eardrums blown out and not ever being able to hear music because they stepped on a landmine that some adult set up there that they had nothing to do with. That's the kind of stuff that I can't live with. So I was looking in Darfur, and it really broke my heart to think of people getting thrown into burning buildings, especially kids, because they didn't want to waste bullets firing on them, and that stuff's real. That's just right over there. And I looked into it so deeply. I spent 2 months trying to figure out where this came from, and I stumbled upon the conclusion that it was resource scarcity and people who didn't like each other being forced to compete over those things. And it wasn't written down anywhere at that time. At least I couldn't find it. And I was like, oh my God, it's climate change. And I thought, there's all these wars going on. You want to stop a war, stop it before it starts, because if climate change gets any worse, it's going to be war after war after war after war after war until we're almost all gone. And it's going to be a toxic wasteland here on this planet. The Venus syndrome. And when he's talking about the methane bomb, it's when the boreal forest thaws out and all the permafrost thaws out and that comes out. But so I realized that I had to be into climate change, so I looked at it a little further, and I found out from James Hansen and those guys that there was just this tiny window of opportunity to actually do something. Well, what else could we possibly try to do with our lives than to embrace that gift of we can be relieved of the burden of not knowing what to do with ourselves now. I mean, our culture is vapid. We don't have to try and figure out who's the best next American Idol or vote for politicians and that sort of thing anymore. We can fight as life, as part of the great big force of life that knows what to do, that can sustain itself, that can be that can be on this little rock is out in space, and this delicate little situation, and with all this beauty, and this thing that makes our hearts sing, and the music we hear in our heads and everything like that. And so it came from that, and then so I started looking into climate change, and I haven't been doing this a hell of a long time, but I think I'm lacking the gene that makes me stop and be careful before I start doing stuff. I just kind of start doing it, and I don't know what's going to happen. Kind of like the speech. But never let that stop you. So I started looking into climate change. I was like, well, what's going on? How can we fix this? I mean, we don't have any time. The UN, right? I'll raise money for myself, and I'll go to Copenhagen. So go to Copenhagen. Is this going to work? Is this going to happen? And, Copenhagen, they had in the square and everything. And I was like, yeah, let's see. And I said, who's working on this part? With the G70 and so I talked to them, and no one was in charge. If you pardon my language, it was a total shit show. Copenhagen, it was a joke. No one there who had good ideas had any kind of authority whatsoever, and it was industry, and that was my second heartbreak. I remember I walked around Copenhagen. I got there I got to the Copenhagen Square at night one time by myself, and I was all cold, and they cleaned up for the night, and they had all these signs about Copenhagen, and the thing was going nowhere, and it was obvious the people in charge. This was all just a show to make it look like something was going on, something was happening, and this little paper blew across my feet, and then I looked out and I thought about those future generations, and I looked across the square and there was no one there, and I just started crying, and I know I've teared up twice at this because it's my most passionate subject, but I don't normally cry a lot, and I realized there was nothing protecting them at all that had any power. Our world is completely upside down. It used to be that when we were living in tribes and everything as a species, selfish weirdos, sociopathic people got kicked out. I mean, they didn't work. It didn't make sense to have them around. They were going to steal your stuff and push people out of the way, and it's like, yeah, hit the road. You're probably going to die out there. Somehow, over the last 12,000 years or however long it's been, it's completely flipped. And now we celebrate them. I mean, we actually have parades for people who are the most selfish now. I mean, it's incredible. It blows my mind. And so I think that recognizing that those are the people that are in charge. They've wormed their way to the very top. There's not very many of them. There aren't very many enemies, and a lot of people in this room might disagree with me on that. But like those mine workers that quit their jobs in the dream, there are people who are lost in this subverted system. They're doing their best to shuffle things around, or they're trying to work for their family, or hell, everyone else is doing it, I'll get mine. Or their parents stopped them that. It's deep inside us, this sickness and this mental illness. But I don't think there are very many bad people in the world, and it's a matter of developing our compassion and taking on the lessons that have been taught so many times in the past about how to develop compassion and understanding, and try to communicate and develop community and everything like that. That's really has to be part of the reclaiming of power in my idea. Because I mean, we do have to overthrow this stuff. I mean, it's not working for us. It's done. I mean, it's going to fall apart on its own. There are a lot of good plans coming out for people today, and not as far as taking charge and everything. But I think that there have been a lot of revolutions in the past where you run in by the tens of thousands, and maybe people get shot down, but they go in and they drag Antonian Scalia out and throw him in a people's prison. Which wouldn't be such a bad idea, but speaking theoretically. But then what? Getting power and taking back, and then you're justifying the system the way it was before. And I think that that's something that we have a danger of doing as economic disparity gets worse and worse and worse, and resource scarcity, and suddenly food disappears off of the grocery shelves, and society really starts to fall apart. We have a natural tendency to, and it's very sort of aggressive male energy thing where you take over, you got the gun and the cool hat with a star or whatever you got on there, and I'm glad at least one person. But I think we really do. We have to take seriously take seriously with the developing of our compassion and love and community and our humanity, and recognizing that our priorities are all whacked, and that the things that make us actually happy, the things that are worth living for, are community, are being heard and having a voice, knowing that somebody understands you, knowing where your shoes come from, those type of things that actually, we've studied it, but that make us feel good and feel like we're part of life. You know, growing our own food, crucial, huge part of it. I don't think there is any other bigger part of it than the whole food, the thing about, you know, local organic food and growing that together. But to me, that's the most important thing. I heard somebody say that we need to become more, our next revolution requires that we become more human beings and create more democratic institutions. And that's the challenge ahead of us as things really do fall apart. And there are things coming up. There are opportunities, and I don't have all the answers. And frankly, you said, Ron, you said so many things that I would have loved to say. So you got it, man. I just want to rewind that, watch it again if I'm ever feeling down. And about the dreaming, I'm so glad for the work you've done and for the work you've done. And everyone here has contributed a lot in your own stories, in your own ways. There are some things coming up. I'm on a planning committee for September 17th, Occupy Wall Street. If it works out, maybe with your help, it'll be a full-fledged occupation of Wall Street with tents and encampments. They're doing a democratic online vote to decide what the one demand will be, and so far, revoking corporate personhood is still holding in the lead for the number one demand. Now, how that's actually going to happen, we'll see, but it's a step in the right direction. It's people actually acting out on a good idea. They could use some more guidance and some more experience. Of course, there's the October 6th. That's going on. Maybe some people in here are involved in it. I'm not sure. I know that some of my people have been on the advisory committee for that. I would like to see that turn into something very real instead of just a bunch of people getting arrested and hauled out or hit with sound cannons or whatever happens. But it's an escalation, right? And then one thing that I've just heard about in the last couple of weeks that I'm really excited about is the People's Congress next spring in Washington, where actually people will be getting together, electing our own, or appointing and electing our own representatives, passing laws out on the mall and taking them into Congress. I think that situation could be, there's a lot of potential there, and I'm really happy to see where it goes and to be able to play a part in that. So it isn't as though there's nowhere to start plugging in. And sure, none of these things are crucial, but you never know what you're doing in something like this. You can plan it and you can get these great ideas like the Commonwealth and Common Health, and that new government should protect and expand rights. I love that. And the 60s, is it 60s? Democratize, decarbonize, decentralize, demilitarize, detoxify, and decriminalize. Where we need revolution, not reform. Those are good. People have good plans. We could do this. We could take back power, build a new system of taking care of ourselves, more highly, localized. We could do all these things. The one thing we do have, and I probably need to end, but the one thing we do have is numeric superiority, and we have a collective conscience that is right. That most people don't like Congress. Most people want things like a price on carbon. Most people want a world where their children can grow up without tumors on their faces. Most people want these kind of things. Most people are progressives, I think, in this country. There's a couple of problems. One, our votes don't really count because voter fraud is hugely rampant, and I've been learning more and more about that in the last few days. But I've also learned that there's a huge resistance in the progressive community, and I'm really curious why. With all the evidence that you're trying to elect the right people to be our leaders, when the right people don't really stand a chance of getting elected because corporations count the ballots. Does that sound like crazy talk or something? I mean, I don't know why that isn't the main issue. It's common sense, right? I mean, corporations count the ballots, and there's no oversight really of it. I mean, maybe in local elections there. That needs to be a big deal. I mean, people need to pick that torch up and put it out front. I mean, what's the point in doing all this? yammering about getting the right politicians in and spending trillions of people hours knocking on doors and raising money and contributing and feeling good about ourselves because we worked on some sort of campaign when the whole voting system doesn't even actually mean anything, and it's a really easy solution. Just have hand-counted paper ballots. It's not very complicated. That needs to be, seriously needs to be part of it. And then I'll end with my little journey led back to another thing. When I was like, climate change this, climate change that. Copenhagen failed because the U.S. Senate ruined it. There's a lot of reasons, but it kind of all comes down to that one thing. No other nation would even talk about. You know, they were off the hook because if the U.S. Senate wasn't going to do something about it, passing a bill or whatever, it was just a chance to get together and hang out in Copenhagen. And that happened because our politics are run by corporations and instead of us. We live in an occupied country. We're under occupation. We have what's that syndrome? Stockholm syndrome. And so we do need to take power back. We also need to create a world that's worth saving and worth living in. And I think that if we do focus on these few things, develop these few plans, and then stop being afraid and embrace and be grateful for the chance to live a life so full of meaning, and to honor the heritage that we're inheriting. Like I'm 32, and a lot of people I work with, they're in their 20s or early 20s or even in their teens. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're honoring and we're inheriting something that's been set up by a lot of people who've done a lot of important things in the past and made great sacrifices and put their ass on the line out there and got in the line of fire. And I personally honor that every day when I work with people, but we have to go again. We have to go again big, and we're going to. It just depends. Right now we have the chance to step in and decide what it's going to look like. If we're going to make a cleaner, greener version of the world we have now, which is a bunch of crap, or if we're going to build a better world that we actually want to live in, that we would leave to the thousandth generation. So I really appreciate the chance to be here and to talk to you guys, and I look forward to working with you for the rest of our lives. So.